Thank you all. Just going to pull my presentation up. All right, there we go. Hi, everybody. So I'll start with a question, if I may. How many of you find the word data intimidating? Be honest, you can be honest. About half of you. Well, okay. There was a time when I didn't like the word data. And then I started to get into spreadsheets and found them empowering, honestly. And I'd like to try and share some of that, that feeling with you today. It's quite an accessible thing to do, actually, is take data and turn it into content marketing. And the power is that then you're saying something that nobody else has said before, potentially. And that's a really hard thing to come by in content, is content that is fresh and original, completely fresh and original. But you've got to start with a plan. And here at BigWing we have two questions that we ask before we create any piece of content. The first one is, what is the goal of this piece of content? And we're pretty specific. We have 5 permissible goals. Conversions at the center. You want somebody to take an action on your website that is desirable. To fill out a form, pick up the phone. That's the center of the bullseye, right? Always aiming for that. But you shoot for the moon and you may hit a star. Permission assets around the outside. You want to be growing your permission assets. And permission assets are when somebody, a potential customer, gives you permission to market to them in the future. By coming here, giving us your email addresses, you've given us permission to market to you in the future and say, hey, Lift, there's another Lift session you might be interested in. And that's powerful because people read their emails. And then around the edges, we have qualified traffic. So that's traffic that by its nature, the qualified nature, is that it might turn into permission assets or conversions, your potential customers. Social engagement from your potential customers. Relevant links from other websites that have the potential to send you customers. Hence relevant. That's question 1, goals. You set your goals. Question 2, what's the promotion plan? Just 2 questions. So this is a little, I'm going to delve into that a little bit now. What's the promotion plan? Content marketing always starts with content, right? You need great content. But if this is what you're doing, you're up there in that star, then maybe you're an old school journalist. You're creating content, you're hitting publish, you're forgetting about it. The audience is assumed. A more forward-thinking journalist might be acting like this. Core of content, right? There's my great content, but I'm going to drive some audience myself. I'm going to be building a social platform or social followers. I'm going to push it out there to people. We're getting closer to a real kind of content marketer here, where they're also thinking about search. Well, how's someone going to find this piece of content through search? Are there people looking for this? And can I use the tools of SEO, keyword research, and on-page SEO to drive more people to this content? And the real sweet spot is if you can also think about outreach at the same time. And these are all different disciplines. So it's super hard to find content marketers to hire. And if you know anybody or you're interested, we're hiring right now. But sweet spot right here. But if you're acting like that in any magazine or platform, you can start a blog and you can really make it fly, because you have the ability not only to create great content, but also to get an audience for that content. So, goals and promotion plan. And these two talk to each other, right? And they need to look like a coherent whole. So from those comes your headline or your title for your piece of content. And I believe that if you pitch me a headline or a title for a piece of content, I can see your goals and your promotion intent, your intent in that sentence, and I can tell you whether it's going to work more often than not. I can tell you where it's weak. What are you really trying to get out of this? Or how is this going to actually reach people? And those things need to speak to each other, be a coherent whole. So we just put on Confluence. That's the last thing I've been working on as a content marketer. And the 3 examples that I'm going to give you are all from Confluence. Did anybody here attend Confluence? You stick your hand in the air. Okay, good. Most of you, that's great. So you'll know what we're talking about. I won't need to give you much background. It's a digital marketing conference here. And these are the people that we're looking to bring to Confluence. We are explicit about figuring out who we're targeting. These are personas. So a digital marketing professional, a director of marketing, and a business owner. These are the people that we think will be most interested in Confluence. So when we create content for Confluence, we're thinking about that as our target audience. So when you create content, be able to picture and ideally personify your customers so that you can speak to them more intimately. And this is a very similar audience, as we just noted, to Lyft. So I make pains to meet you people, I am you people, honestly. So I feel I can speak to you effectively. Okay, so now let's talk about an actual piece of content, right? So that's the kind of highfalutin framework. Now let's kind of get more real. So there's a rumble in the sky, right? In the back of your brain. And maybe you've primed your subconscious and you're just getting a moment of insight. And you think, oh, there's an idea for something. Well, have a pen and a pad handy, because those are fleeting insights. So you've had your idea. And my first idea I want to share with you is speakers are really hard to find in digital marketing, in the digital marketing circle, especially in Oklahoma and the region. So that must be a problem other people have too. So I Googled digital marketing speakers and digital marketing speakers guide. And I have 2 questions for you again, another 2 questions for this validate process of the idea stage. Has it already been done? And in this instance, Marketo, a marketing automation tool on their blog, did this piece of content. It's basically it's using Listly for the community to put in their favorite speakers and then up and down vote them, which is cool. And they've had a lot of engagement on it. There's like 10,000 shares. So the answer really is no. I don't think I can do this. So to the second question, which is, could you do it 10 times better? So it has been done. Second question, can you do it 10 times better? Not just a little bit better, because it's got to be so much better that everybody links to it instead, that everybody shares it instead, that it can work its way to the top of the search rankings. And my answer here is no, I can't do that better. So we got to pivot. What about a digital marketing speakers map? Has anybody mapped this data? I Google it? No, that's not been done. Well, that's a cool idea too. Let's do that. So I've got my idea, I've validated it, and now I'm going to build a database. This is the only time I'm going to go through this stage, right? Because this is the more intense stage. This is the bit that's going to require you guys to be really tuned in. So we're going to build a database, we're going to test it, we're going to populate it, and we're going to clean it. But where do I get the data from? I think I can think of 3 sources of data, and I'm going to share them with you. The first one is we can mine new data. And this first example is that. Gold exists in the ground. You mine it, and thereby you create it. It's the same with data. So I have this idea about a speakers map, a map of all the speakers in digital marketing. That's cool. How am I going to find that data? Well, it exists. I just need to figure out a framework within which I can pool it together. So the idea is, I'll take the 5 biggest digital marketing conferences in the 5 disciplines that which are paid search, content marketing, social media, SEO, and PR advertising and other. It's a big one. And then I will I'll just scrape all the data from all of these 5 conferences. I'll just take all of their speakers, and that'll be my pool of speakers. And from that large sample, I will infer things, and those will be the guys who make it onto my map. So you can use a tool. This is Scraper. It's a Chrome plugin. I actually did this, what you're going to see by hand, but you can get your, roll your sleeves up depending on your comfort level with things like this, and do this. So what data can we access, and what data will we actually use? These two things combine for a plan of your database. And all your plan of your database is it's a row of things, columns that you want to populate. Each of these is going to be a speaker. I'm going to have which conference they're in, how many times they spoke at different things. That's going to be a formula of their name, their picture URL. All of this stuff exists on these other websites. I just have to take it and put it in my database. So I'm going to mine new data. But before I do that, I want to make my data as clean as possible when it comes in. Because I'm not actually going to do all the data pulling. I'm going to use an intern to do it. Stage one. Now this is really hard to read, especially the way that I've arranged it. Stage one, you highlight your column and you hit under data, validation. This is called data validation, and it's a super useful tool in Excel. This box comes up, data validation box. Under criteria, you put in the different things that you want to be permissible in that column. So in the specialism column, I only want you to be able to select content marketing, analytics, conversion UX, SEO, social media, etc., right? Those are the only things that are permissible. And then, when my intern comes in and clicks that column, he gets a drop down with only the things that I want him to be able to do, because I'm a control freak. And then, number 4, if by chance he does put in something else, oh, this guy's specialism is SEM rather than PPC/advertising, then it'll pop up as an error, invalid content, and we'll all know that he's a bad intern. Then I test the database. Okay, this bit, I'm still doing this myself. So for each of the different conferences, I go through and I pull one and I refine it, right? Maybe, oh, actually that column isn't available in that conference, so I'll just kill that column. And then we populate the database. 360 speakers. It took about a week of the intern's time. Okay, but your data won't be clean. It'll be cleaner than it would have been if you hadn't used data validation, but it still won't be clean. So you're going to have to clean it. And here's an example of unclean data and clean data. Basically, the ones that are sort of highlighted, you can see that I'm trying to basically create standards. So it's not Dallas/Fort Worth. We'll just call that Dallas. It's not TX or Texas. Let's just call that TX. Then when we get to the next stage where we're presenting the data, we can just say, go pull all the TXs, and it'll do it. Because I know that Texas in my database is TX, and that Oklahoma is OK. Okay, so now we're at the present stage. The lightning is coming down. Right, it's going to strike soon. Here we get the data chart ready. So if you use spreadsheets, you will recognize this along the top. A spreadsheet is made up of, it's a book with sheets. And at the far left is my speakers sheet. That's the one we already saw. That's where all my data lives. And then I create a new worksheet for each of the different charts that I want to create. So I want one about unique speakers, overlap, conferences, gender, race, specialisms by conference. This is a somewhat complicated and yet beguilingly easy thing to do, and so I want to share it with you. So this is the data, this is the worksheet for specialisms by conference. And all I did was I said, well, here's my conferences. I know they're called that in the database, because I forced my intern to call them that. Here's all the specialisms along the top. I know that they're called that in the database. Here's a formula. It's really simple. Once you've written that, you can just drag it all down here and boom, the data's in there for you. I say it's really simple, it's somewhat simple. The translation of that is essentially, that's nice, you can touch this. If a speaker both speaks at MozCon and their specialism is PPC advertising, add 1 to this cell. So I'm saying, look over here, look at the database. Are you seeing this speaker spoke at MozCon? Yes, I am, says the spreadsheet. Look up here. Are you seeing that they also have a PPC as their specialism? Oh yes, says the spreadsheet. And they add one person to here. They do that for the whole of that sheet, and you end up with cool data that you can do this kind of thing with. So now I'm in piktochart. I'm presenting the data. Piktochart is awesome. If you need to know more about piktochart, Rachel Mann right here in the middle of the audience has won competitions for her piktochart offerings. So this is the same data. I just copied it out, pasted it in. In this instance, I had to reverse the columns and the rows. You just hit that button up there, and boom, out comes a chart. And it's interactive on the web. Once you embed this on the web, you click here, and it tells you how many people that is. When you load the page, it kind of grows like that. It's really cool. And so easy and free. So what we're seeing from this data, though, is a picture that I've never seen before anywhere else. It's new. I'm seeing that MozCon has the fewest speakers because it's a single-track conference, and that Content Marketing World has tons more. I'm seeing that MozCon, obviously the contrast isn't great, but I'm seeing that MozCon has the most diverse bank of speakers. You learn about all kinds of different things at MozCon, and that Content Marketing World has overwhelmingly content marketing speakers, some social media. The Hero Conference is the least diverse. That's the PPC conference. This is interesting data. I can pull most common speaker job titles, and I can find that 90% of the speakers are either owners down to managers, and only 10% are specialists and scientists and engineers and things. Now there's a whole content idea that I could just delve right into, right? I could reference back to this data, create a whole other blog post. Why aren't we hearing from the people on the ground? Why are we always only hearing from owners and managers? I don't want to hear from them. I want the guy in the corner with the brilliant ideas, please. So it sprawls out. When you have your own data, your own insights, it sprawls out other creative ideas that you can really own and point back to your data. Speaker gender and speaker race. And I went further. Which is the most diverse and least diverse conference as far as gender and race? And then I map it. And this is amazingly simple. Google My Maps. What I mean by that, that's all one phrase. Don't Google My Maps. Google My Maps. That's what this is. Again, the contrast isn't great. But here we have Ruth Bo-Reedy, who's sitting upstairs right now. She's our lead SEO. She's the only person in Oklahoma who made the list. There was a moment, right, where I was like, if I did SMX West as the conference, I would be in the list. But SMX East is my only East Coast conference. Well, one of two. Only, so I really need an East Coast conference. And I had to be the bigger man and say, I'll do East, and then I won't even be in my own list. So Ruth is the only Oklahoma speaker to make the list. And there she is. And these are just the columns that we had in the database. And then over here, I'm going to show you how to do this as well. I chose specialism as the way to kind of determine with one click, the way to determine what color the pins are. So you can click on content marketing, boom, you're just looking at the content marketers. And this is what that looks like. So you have to create a CSV file, which is just like save as CSV rather than XLS. It's simple. In order to import it, because that's what Google Maps likes. Google My Maps likes. And then, like I say, the columns just represent, it just does that for you. You upload it and boom, all these map pins drop down. It's great. The phrases, you go through this. Basically, number one, import. Number two, you select the location signifiers, city and state. It doesn't have to be city and state, but sometimes I didn't have a city, but I always had a state in my data set. Of course, you're not going to be able to map data that doesn't have location. 3, choose a column to title your markers. So when I click it up, what's the heading going to be? I want it to be the speaker's name. And 4, what's the uniform style? I chose specialism, and that gave me that thing on the left where the pins are different colors based on specialism. A 4-step process, and all those map pins fall down, and you have a beautiful map that people think you've spent forever on. And then you basically deploy your assets. You build out your blog post. Here it is, US Digital Marketing Speakers Guide and Map. I'm thinking about SEO as well. I'm thinking US digital marketing speakers, these are predominantly in the US, but it's all US conferences, and I know there's search traffic for US. Speakers Guide, there might be search traffic for that, and Map, I'm being explicit about it basically, trying to rank for as much as possible without seeming too spammy. And then I'm saying 2015, right? I might do this again next year. And then an intro, and I start the infographic. We'll talk more about the infographic in a minute. Built up with piktochart, built up of various different elements, all of which are part of my promotion plan. I'm thinking all the time, how is this going to help me promote this conference, this piece of content that will help me to promote the conference? At the end, I have credit given where credit is due. Here's my intern, data entry, John, and some design help that I had because I'm colorblind. I am actually colorblind. Don't laugh, that's a disability. Sometimes I used to work in catering, and I would hide in the disabled toilets some nights. And one time, somebody knocked, and I had to come out, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm disabled." And they asked me why, and I said, "I'm colorblind." So, anyway, to my shame, that was a different life. Okay, so here, like, of course, brought to you by Confluence. I'm thinking this infographic is strong enough that people might embed it on their own websites. And here it is, some information about it. And then at the end, I delve into the methodology, like what we did. I make a bunch of observations about the data that I could then create blog posts behind if I wanted to, create a socially shareable graphic and a downloadable PDF. Basically, I make it as easy to consume as possible. And that's my packet. And then I promote it. And I'm not going to go into all the ways in which I promoted it, but I'm going to talk you through one which stands for all the rest. So, the BigWing team was sitting up in Learning Room A about 4 months ago, watching this webinar. It's called Pioneers of Company Culture by SEER Interactive. There's Will Reynolds, my favorite speaker in the digital marketing world, and Rand Fishkin, who's the former CEO of Moz, but founded Moz. And Rand said, and he runs MozCon, right? My favorite conference, other than Confluence, my second favorite conference. I want to be in a world where no one thinks about the gender or race of the person on a panel. That world will never exist unless we take the steps today. So MozCon they're doing positive discrimination in their selection of speakers. And I noticed that in that webinar. And then I thought about my data, right? And I have this. Originally, I didn't have this bit. I just had this. I had speaker gender, speaker race, and I thought, well, let's see if MozCon really is more diverse. And lo and behold, it was. The most diverse is MozCon. The least diverse is Content Marketing World. So I tweet out. MozCon 2 times as racially diverse as the next most diverse conference. Nice job, Rand Fishkin. And then I link to the piece of content. And I include a picture, right? So I have data now to validate something that I know this guy is passionate about. And by the way, he has 250,000 Twitter followers. A conversation ensues. Aaron is one of the organizers of MozCon. And I've curated this piece of content very carefully. Each of the different specialisms has a block like this. And Dan Holmes, who's sitting in the corner at the back here, who was taking some pictures earlier, is a senior content marketer here, brought us the concept of chunking up data. And that's what I've done here, right? Each of these parts of the infographic is socially shareable. That whole part, like I just shared the MozCon screen grab, right? Well, this is all the top influencers in the world of SEO and how many followers they have, according to my map, right, that are in my data set. And there's Rand, and then where they spoke this year, so where you can see them. That's interesting, useful data, right? Shareable in its own right. From one piece of data mining, you can kick out so much content potentially. Really make it worth your while. But I'm aware now that I have just pinged Rand Fishkin something which he cannot not read about his own conference, and that halfway down the page he's going to see himself as the #1 influencer next to Will Reynolds, the guy he was having a conversation about that with. So you can see where I'm going with this, right? I'm being very deliberate about what I'm creating, how I'm creating, and who I intend to see it and help me promote it. As he gets down the page, we get to the most speakers fielded by company. And there's Moz, his company, 5 speakers. So we tweeted at all of these companies and said, hey, thank you for supporting the digital marketing community. Did you know you sent 4 speakers to 5 of the top conferences this year? Microsoft. And lo and behold, and I can't take all the credit for this because he's also a personal friend of Ruth Burr-Reedy. But what the hell, right? I'll take all the credit. Lo and behold, folks in or near Oklahoma City, looks like an amazing marketing event there, September 10th, 11th, conference, and only $150. To 250,000 fans, 16 retweets. Very nice. So what are the results? Speaker guide. This is the first big piece of content marketing, big data-driven piece of content marketing that we did. And up to the time, it was almost the second. It was almost 2 times as much traffic as the highest previous point that we'd had on the day that launched, which is great. There was a moment where I was watching real time after I tweeted Rand, and Seattle popped up there in Seattle, and I was like, there he is. I was watching the analytics. I was literally watching him read. The next piece I'm going to talk about is this speaker followers piece, which got even more traction. And for your interest, the native ad that we released was actually the biggest traffic driver. Michaela Marks-Wheatley isn't in here, but she's the editor of Brand Insight, which is News OK and the Oklahoman's native piece, native desk. And then these were homepage takeovers on News OK, and then there's the actual event. So the 2 biggest traffic days were both data-driven pieces of content marketing. So that was #1, right? Mine some data. #2, use somebody else's data. What does that look like? Data.gov, the home of the US government's open data. Hello. There's a lot of stories in here to be told. Follow a wonk. This is the reason why I say wonk so much, by the way. I apologize for that. It's not a word. It's not a becoming word for anybody. But basically what you can do is I put myself in my Twitter profile, and it shoots out like where all my Twitter followers are from and just tons of data about me. And I can even say, show me all the data about my followers. This is the key though, right? Downloadable CSV file. Anytime you see something like this, oh, you can export this data to an Excel spreadsheet? Bingo. Boom. Rumble, rumble, right? The idea is coming. What about, that's just going to confuse you. The idea, let me tell you the idea. The idea is, I know who our speakers are, and with Follow a Wonk, I can find out all the people who follow them. And with a spreadsheet, I can refine that down. I can figure out who of those live in Oklahoma and the surrounding states. That would be cool. And I can even then cross-reference them and say, how many speakers each of them speak. And I can filter that so I can just look at people who follow 3 or more speakers. And I'll end up with a little pool of data of people who follow 3 or more speakers on Twitter, and so are highly likely to be interested in hearing them speak, who live within driving distance. And I can turn that into a blog post, and it looks like this. These 280 people should totally come to Confluence. I'm not worried about SEO. That's never going to rank. That's not SEOable. So really just a striking title, a socially shareable title. And what do I lead with? An image of all the speakers, because I'm going to do deliberate outreach to these 280 people, just them. And when they arrive, I want them to be greeted by faces they recognize, because every one of them follows at least 3 of these speakers. Here's the map. You pull on in. Here's Governor Mary Fallin, who follows 5 Confluence speakers. And you can just kind of click around. You can see, well, this is interesting. These are my tribe, right? Mary Fallon isn't my tribe, but you get the idea. I can click around and I can say, there's one person down in Norman. Who is that? Oh, it's Marissa Mohi, who writes for The Lost Ogle. Up in Edmond, who are these people? These people follow the same people that I follow. That's interesting. And then I just copied and pasted the entire database, cleaned it up a little bit so it was a bit more passable, into WordPress. Boom, there it is. You can click through to each of their Twitter profiles. First it says how many speakers they follow. Obviously I've explained what all this is in the post, right? Their name, their bio, their location, how many followers they have and how many people they're following. There's a concept called ego bait, which is old as the hills, really. But people love to come to a piece of content and see themselves, see their name, and be like, oh, wow, that's cool. And of course, where they're from is important. But then we do the outreach. We turn that into a spreadsheet in Google Docs. We all look through it and we assign ourselves to people that we know. So DM, we're going to DM, direct message, keep it local because they follow Confluence. So here it is down here, we're DMing somebody. Kyle Elrod, the chair of Confluence, is going to reach out to Marty. Republican Mary Fallon, nope, we decided we just weren't going to do it. Laurie Ford, that's me. I'm going to reach out because we have a relationship. I know her. And there's an example of me reaching out to somebody. And of course, I'm not just saying, hey, you're in this piece of content. I'm also saying there's a $10 coupon code in the post. I should have phrased that a bit differently. In this post, if you're interested in coming, and there's a link. So we're driving them to that, and then they look, and then they go, oh, wow, okay. It's highly targeted because, hey, wait, I follow 5 of the speakers and there's 20 of them. A quarter of the speakers I already follow as an expert in their industry. I got to come to this conference. So the folks from State of Search emailed Ruth, who just knows everybody, because she's part of the organizing committee of Dallas State of Search. And the guy said, so this came across my email. This who should come to our conference is super slick. How do you guys do this? Can you share the secret sauce? Because we'd love to look into doing something like this for State of Search. Yes, and steal your idea. Cool, right? So what did I do? I blogged it. Within that day, he sent that email that same day, created a blog post around it. One clever way to market an event, boom, and lo and behold, of course he's going to promote that. All right, I just basically created a post just for him. And he posts it out, he invites me on his podcast. Okay, that's way number 2. Way number 3, use your own data. Hey, wait a minute. We've got tons of data. You know, you have your CRM, you have all of the data about your customers, you have all kinds of industry data. So for Confluence, we're looking for sponsors, and I was responsible for pulling sponsors in for Confluence this year, something that we'd neglected previously, and sales is super hard, by the way, but I wanted to kind of get my feet wet. So here's one of Seth, one of our sponsors from Visit OKC, and they did this hashtag COKC thing they were promoting. And the question that these guys kept asking me was, who's the audience? You know, who am I buying my way in front of? And I'd say 280 marketers, directors of marketing. I'd use our personas, right? But that's not data. That's not strong enough. You know, rumble, idea. Now we have sold all these tickets. I have the data of all of the people who are going to attend. I know what the audience looks like. I can be much more explicit about who they are. And so I use piktochart to take that data, same process that we went through before, it's just our data, and I created this, which looks so much better on the website. But I give them the attendee job title breakdown, the states from which people were coming from, the industries in which they're in, the average number of followers that they have on Twitter, and the organizations that are in attendance. The data that somebody who is trying to determine whether they want to sponsor something wishes that they had. And again, at Confluence, Greg Gifford came up to me and said, because he's involved in Dallas State of Search, and said, and was like, we got to do this too. This is amazing. We're totally going to do that as well. And then, of course, you've got that data. Just use it in the various media outlets that you have, and Confluence is one of those. So I used it on the stage and told folks, hey, here's who you are. That's kind of interesting. And then I used it to validate, or our intention is to use that to validate our personas so that we can get even better at targeting people. And I want to end with a thought, which is that when you're doing building databases, when you're doing that kind of legwork, you're building a machine or you're building a mold. These are button molds. And when you're building a mold, you've done half the work for the next time already. So reuse it. Let's do a US Digital Marketing Speakers Guide 2016. The speaker followers, that's the 3rd year that we've done that. Okay, recap. Idea. Validate your idea. Refine your idea. Do that work up front because it's a ton of work to actually create one of these things. A week or 2 of work. So you don't want to be doing the wrong idea. Database it. Build your database. Test your database before you populate your database. Clean your database so that you can present your data as smoothly as possible. Spend the time thinking about how the presentation of your data will impact your ability to market that data, to promote it, and then promote. And we have a saying that we're fond of: content marketing is content plus marketing. 50-50. Half content, half marketing. So you've got to spend the time on your promotion. Don't just assume people will come, because they won't. Those 280 people who we specifically curated into that list would never have seen that content unless we reached out to them and told them about it. Because the dirty secret is nobody comes to your blog unless you make them. And that's all I have for you.